So we're going to go ahead and we're going to revisit our twisted pair networking cabling again, and we're going to be talking about two important types of network cables that are commonly used in our twisted pair network cabling environments, and that is our straight through cable and our crossover cable. So we need to talk about these because they're highly used throughout networks and are commonly used. You're going to see them a lot. So let's talk about the specifics. And the difference between them is how the cables are ordered when we put the RJ45 jack on the end. And in the next slide, I will show you the difference. So first, let's talk about how these work and what type of devices they're used to connect. So a straight through cable is used to connect non-similar devices. So what do I mean by non-similar devices? Well, I mean devices that are not the same. And let's go ahead and let's take a look. So for example, what I mean by non-similar, an example would be a router connected to a switch because they're different types of devices. Another example would be a computer to a switch, again, because they're two different types of devices. And a third one would be a switch connected to a wireless access point because, again, they are separate types of devices. Now, on the flip side, a crossover is the exact opposite. It's used to connect similar devices. And so what I mean by similar devices, well, a good example, a computer to a computer, a switch to a switch, and then a router directly connected to a computer. So this one gets a lot of people. So why a router connected to a computer? Well, because a router acts like a computer. It's a very smart device with its own operating system. So we really consider it a smart device similar to a computer. So we use a crossover cable to connect a router directly to a computer. So let's jump to the next slide and let's look at the cabling difference. And this should be fairly similar to what you saw before. And we're going to be looking at our two standards, our 568A and our 568B. So when we want to connect computers and make them a straight through cable, we are going to be making them the same on both sides. So if we're doing the 568B here, and let me get my highlighter tool out so I can go ahead and highlight this a little bit to make it a little easier to read. So if we're going to use our 568B or 568A, this would be one side of the cable over here, and this would be another side over here. So the cable is going to look the same on both sides. And that would be a straight through cable. However, if we wanted to do a crossover, and you'll notice here it says crossed wiring. So if our organization was doing 568A and we wanted to make a crossover cable, you'll notice that this side is going to meet this and be equal to what this looks like. However, there's going to be some switches over here. And so you just need to look at this diagram and determine the right order on the other side because some of the cables are crossed. And same thing for the 568B. And so that's the difference. When we're looking at these pin numbers here on this RJ45 jack, we need to make sure that the proper numbers align on each side. And you'll notice that we have cables that are crossed over here in multiple different areas, and that's why we call it a crossover cable versus a straight to cable. And that's the difference. So now let's do some more examples talking about our crossover and our straight through cables. And we talked about it in a previous video. So here's some examples. So we have a straight through cable. Remember, this is for non-similar devices. So what do we have here? Well, the first one we have a switch connected to a router. The second one we have a switch to a computer. These are non-similar devices, so we would use a straight through cable. Over here we have a crossover, and remember we use a crossover for a similar type of device. So we have a router to a router, we have a router to a computer, again because a router is a smart device and it has its own operating system, so we really consider it like a computer. And then we have a computer to a computer and a switch to a switch. Make sense? If not, just pause the video and just go back to the first slide and start the video from the beginning and watch through again, and it'll help make sense. Because on the next slide, what we're going to do is I have a diagram, and let me pull that up, and now I want us to identify what type of cable that we're going to use. So from here to here, we have a switch to a wireless access point. What type of cable would we use here? Well, it's non-similar, so I am going to go ahead and write ST for straight through. And so that would go both here, right? Because we have non-similar devices there from a switch to a wireless access point. And then also over here, we have a switch to a computer, again, non-similar. So right here, we would also have a straight through. We would not use a crossover. Now, what about from here to here? We have a switch to a switch. These are similar devices, so we are going to use a crossover, and I'm just going to say CO for crossover. Now if we go over a little further, again we have a switch to a computer. So from here to here, non-similar, this is going to be straight through. And again, we have a switch to a router, non-similar devices, so we would use a straight through cable here as well. And then down here, we have a router connected to a computer. So remember we said that a router is like a computer. It's a smart device, it has its own operating system, so that would be a crossover cable that we would use to connect these devices together. And then we have one more to look at. We have a laptop up to a laptop, so that's a computer to a computer. Similar devices, so again we're going to use a crossover cable to connect these together. So it's as simple as that. All you need to do when you're diagramming out and designing your network and determining what type of cable to use is you need to look at it and say, is this a similar device or a non-similar device? And for similar devices, we're going to be using a crossover cable, and for non-similar, we're going to be using a straight through cable. So that's going to go ahead and conclude this video. Again, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next video.